If you've been scrolling through endless specs, watching video after video comparing tiny workstations, and you still feel that knot in your stomach wondering whether any of them will actually fit into your cramped office without turning you into a performance-chasing hamster, this review is here to untangle that for you. I've spent the last few days setting up the Lenovo ThinkStation P3 Tiny in a real-world workflow connecting two 4K monitors, plugging in a USB-C dock, and running a mix of CAD files, Lightroom catalogs, and a handful of virtual machines so you can hear what it's like before you click Add to Cart. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the thing that makes a tiny desktop feel like a compromise is usually the trade-off between raw horsepower and the space it occupies. The ThinkStation P3 Tiny packs an Intel Core i5-14500 vPro, which is a 14-core, 5 GHz capable chip that sits in the same family as the processors you'd find in mid-range laptops. In practice, that means you can slice through a 200-page PDF with a 3D model open, run a couple of Docker containers, and still have headroom for a quick video render without the fan screaming into your ears. It's not a workstation that will replace a dual Xeon rig for massive simulation farms, but for a freelance architect who needs to switch between AutoCAD and Photoshop multiple times a day, the performance feels surprisingly generous. The real star here is the memory configuration. With 32 GB of DDR5 RAM, the machine can keep large design files resident while you're hopping between apps. I tested it by loading a 6 GB Revit project, then opening a 4 GB Photoshop document, and finally pulling up a web browser with a dozen tabs. The system never dipped below 70% CPU utilization, and the SSD stayed responsive, no stuttering, no waiting for swap files. That kind of capacity is often missing from other tiny PCs that settle for 8 GB or 16 GB, forcing you to upgrade later. Space saving is the headline. The chassis is roughly the size of a paperback novel, so it slides neatly onto a narrow desk or even a wall-mounted shelf. The trade-off is that you lose a few ports you'd expect on a full-size tower. There's only two USB-A, one USB-C with power delivery, and a single HDMI and DisplayPort combo. For a multi-monitor setup you'll need an external dock or a USB-C hub, something I did with a 120W Thunderbolt 4 dock that adds extra Ethernet and audio jacks. If you're comfortable using a dock, the tiny footprint is a win. If you rely on a plethora of direct connections, you might feel constrained. Now, let's talk about the multi-display capability because that's where the tiny label often trips people up. The P3 Tiny advertises dual 4K support, and it delivers. I hooked two 38402160 panels via the HDMI and the DisplayPort, and the OS recognized both instantly. Dragging a timeline in Premiere Pro across the two screens felt fluid, and there was no visible lag when moving windows around. The only catch is the total bandwidth. If you push both monitors to 60 Hz at full 4K while also using a high-resolution external webcam, you could start to see minor flicker. For most office and creative workloads, think spreadsheets on one screen, a design canvas on the other, it's more than enough. Power consumption is another hidden factor. The P3 Tiny draws roughly 70 W under load, which translates to a modest electric bill and, more importantly, a cooler office environment. The fan profile is smart. It stays silent while you're browsing, and only ramps up modestly when the CPU hits sustained high usage. I could keep it on a small conference room table for a half-day meeting without anyone noticing the hum, which is a pleasant surprise compared to bulkier workstations that turn the room into a mini wind tunnel. Who should consider this machine? If you're a small to medium business that needs a reliable, secure workstation for each employee, especially in a space-constrained office, this is a solid fit. The vPro support adds remote manageability, so IT can push updates or troubleshoot without physically touching the unit. It also means the ThinkStation can be locked down with enterprise-grade security policies, a feature that makes it attractive for sectors like finance or legal where data protection is non-negotiable. Freelancers who need a portable, high-memory desktop that can sit on a kitchen counter while they edit footage also get a lot of value here. Who should skip it? If your daily grind revolves around heavy GPU-bound tasks like large-scale 3D rendering, machine learning model training, or running multiple high-resolution video streams, you'll feel the lack of a dedicated graphics card. The P3 Tiny relies on integrated Intel Xe graphics, which handles office apps, light video work, and even some modest gaming, but it won't replace a workstation with an RTX 4000 series GPU. Also, if you're a gamer who expects to push 1080p titles at 144Hz, the integrated graphics will be a bottleneck, and you'll be better off with a small form-factor gaming PC that includes a discrete GPU. On the value side, the price point sits in a sweet spot when you compare it.